Thanks for tuning in to more college football talk on the Our Lads Football Network as we talk SEC football, Georgia Bulldogs football, and for the first time on the network, we are going to be joined by Radi Nabulsi. He is the publisher of UGAsports.com, filling in for Anthony Dasher, who has been on this program several times before. He couldn't make it. But Radi, thanks a lot for stepping in. Of course, you run things over at UGAsports.com, so good break for us.
Yeah, I don't know how well I run them, but I'm at least here. Now, you guys are having to go with plan B because Dash is actually one that knows he's the one that always knows what's going on. But I do sign the paycheck, so occasionally I have to fill in.
There you go. The first question I wanted to ask you is, what's the deal with your Twitter page? Who's this guy here?
That is a young Abdullah the Butcher.
Oh, is that a wrestler?
Oh, yeah, from way back in the day. He actually was a Canadian who pretended to be an Arab, which was hilarious because I'm an Arab who pretends to be a football analyst, so it works for me.
Okay. Who was that other? Wasn't there another one? Oh, the Iron Sheik. That's the other one. Okay. So those are the days. Wow. Was that a black and white? Was that an actual black and white photo?
Yeah, the actual black and white photo of
That's
him
how
back
long
when he
ago
first started. So
okay, we're talking
and he
even
retired
before
to Atlanta,
my time.
Opened up a rib shop in Atlanta.
Oh, very nice. Well, hey, it's America, right?
Yep. Amen.
Okay, let's talk Georgia football. First, I want to talk about the team because they got the big matchup with Clemson. We'll say that for later. But Kirby Smart, year 6, and there are an awful lot of fan bases out there that would absolutely love to have what's going on with Georgia over the last 5 years. They would take it every day of the week. I think the only maybe few schools who wouldn't or be satisfied probably be Alabama and Clemson, maybe Ohio State. But 98% would love what's going on. But that's not the case, is it? Fans are getting spoiled, aren't they?
Yeah, we're getting spoiled. I mean, every coach has a fatal flaw, if you will, except maybe Nick Saban. Let's say that Urban Meyer, he bounced from school to school. He had some health issues. You point to any great coach, they're either a great X's and O's coach who can't recruit well, or they're a great recruiter who can't coach well.
That's Sarkisian, by the way, a great recruiter who can't coach well.
Exactly. People talk about Harbaugh's supposed to be this great, and Harbaugh's had his troubles. Mention every great coach out there, and there's a question mark around them, except maybe, like I said, Nick Saban, who can lose his entire staff and just reload it. It doesn't matter to him. He's got more coaches fired in the SEC than anybody else because he set the standard. No one can duplicate it. So the thing is with Mark Richt was he recruited some great players, but he never had them all on one team. It was, hey, great, you have no Sean Marino, you have a David Green, you have a Shockley, but they're not all there at the same time. With your Seymour and your AJ Green and stuff like that. You couldn't put it all together. Kirby Smart's come in. Oh, and you didn't have an indoor facility. You only had like one plane to go recruiting in. There wasn't the support from the university that Mark Richt needed.
Okay.
Kirby Smart comes in. Open checkbook. You want an indoor facility? Here's your indoor facility. You want locker rooms that haven't been updated since the 50s? Here's $80 million for new locker rooms. You want a new football building? Here's another $80 million. Throw everything in. You need 5 planes to go recruiting? Here's 6 planes. Go nuts. He signs back-to-back number 1 recruiting classes. Facilities off the charts. You got the Taj Mahal over there off of Lumpkin Street. That's just phenomenal. It's state of the art. You've got everything you want, but now you have to deliver.
That's right.
And so that's why they're like, okay, it's not Mark Richt's players anymore. They're your players. They're some of the most highly rated players in the nation. You have 3 5-star tailbacks in the same room. And and one of the 4-star guys may be the best of all of them. You have 4 or 5 5-star offensive linemen. You have 5 stars on the defense and the secondary all over the place. In other words, there are no excuses at this point that you can hang your hat on and say, hey, this is our Achilles heel. Okay, last year you were bringing a new offensive coordinator. This year 2 for him. Your quarterback transfer that, you lose Jake Fromm to the NFL and you bring in a quarterback transfer and Jamie Newman from Wake Forest. 2 weeks before the season, he opts out and now you're scrambling. Don't have that situation anymore. A tough SEC schedule. Normally the schedule is ridiculous. This year you've got Clemson and nothing. And that's not taking a shot against Florida or anybody else, but you're not playing Alabama. You're not playing Texas A&M. You're not playing LSU. This is probably the easiest schedule they'll ever see, because once you add in Oklahoma and Texas next year, a lot of people think it'll be later. I think it'll be next year.
Wow.
Or just the rotation rolls around. You're not going to have that. So it's kind of a lot of teams would love to have what Kirby's having, but now it's okay. What are you going to do with it? And so that's the big question mark. And a lot of people are putting that attention on this game. And if I had my way, I would explain to them, this isn't the season. You can lose this game. You can lose this game badly. But if you win out, or you play Alabama in the SEC title game and win that, you're in the playoffs.
Yes.
So.
And he's not going to get fired even if they lose 50-0 to Clemson on Saturday night. So it is not about the game, like you said. It's about the season. And it would be a shock if Georgia didn't at least make it to the playoffs this year with that schedule. It'd be shocking, and it would be warranted for Georgia to be thinking about what we should be doing with our head coaching situation. So
I don't really worry about it, but it would feel like a trend, because in year 2, Kirby, when he wasn't supposed to, gets them to the national title game, and you go into overtime. You're 2 seconds away from winning your first national championship in year 2 under Kirby. Then you win the SEC title, but you don't win the SEC title. Then you don't make it to the SEC title game. In other words, it feels like they've been on a downward slope, even though they've been getting better and better players. So
good point. Yep.
You got to get that. You've been there, and you know you can get there again, but it helps to have that kind of upward trend. Let's say you don't win the title, but at least you won the SEC championship.
Yes.
You won you got into the playoffs and maybe lose in the first round. At least you're like, hey, we're still building.
The arrow pointed upward again.
Right.
Yes.
And I try to tell people this all the time. What's most important about this coming game against Clemson is both teams have 200 tickets that they can give to recruits who can sit in the stands and watch this. Georgia and Clemson go head-to-head over recruiting targets all the time. They're about 90 minutes apart, the school campuses are.
Yeah.
Both recruit North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee. You go head-to-head with these guys all the time. That will go a long way, especially considering the national championship isn't determined until well after that first signing period in December 22nd or so. So that's you want to be able to say, hey, you're looking at going to Clemson? Well, we beat them head-to-head. You need to come here.
Well, it should be an interesting game also, because you have 2 quarterbacks who have played, but not in this type of situation. It's like first game of the season. This is your team. And as long as you're healthy, it's your team the entire season. So let's see what you got. And it was very important for JT Daniels to get some action last year. And he had some good moments. There were some issues, but that's to be expected. It's his first year. It's a new system. Overall, though, now with the talent surrounding him, the expectations, it's just got to be through the roof. I was looking at the passing offensive statistics for Georgia, because I knowing and following this team, I know that it's not the passing offense under Kirby Smart has not led the team. It's been the running game, the defense, strong offensive line. So I looked and I go, well, sure enough, Todd Monken, first year, they were 45th in passing offense. That's the middle of the road. What's so special about that? Well, before that, it was 72nd, 73rd, 106, 97, 104, and 90. You have to go all the way back to Aaron Murray's senior season in 2013 when they ranked 15th in passing offense, and they had a better passing overall grade nationally, and maybe they will be able to eclipse that this year with JT Daniels.
Well, also, remember, they only played 10 games. What if they'd gotten 2 out-of-conference games?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you start throwing the ball all over the place. Remember also George Pickens, one of the best wide receivers in the nation, missed a lot of those games. He was out. And that really came back to haunt them in the Georgia-Florida game. That was a huge loss. He and Jordan Davis, the nose guard, who is an absolute monster in the middle, losing those 2 guys killed them against Florida. But here's the thing. Everyone's like, well, JT Daniels is – I've seen – when I was out in Vegas over the summer and we went into one of the sports books, he was listed as the number 1 guy on the Heisman Trophy chart. And we're like, Who's talking about JT Daniels for a Heisman Trophy? That is way, way too based off of 4 games
Yeah,
against 4 of Georgia's weakest opponents last year. Now, granted, while he was in there, they're throwing for 300 yards a game. It's a completely different look with him at quarterback. But again, it wasn't against a Clemson secondary that has a ton of starters returning. It wasn't against an Alabama secondary. It wasn't against a Florida secondary. You didn't see Elam of Florida out there knocking passes down against JT Daniels. He will have to do that this year. So, DJ Ungalele, he's a guy that you know what you get. You saw him in that Notre Dame game.
sure.
The Clemson defense actually let them down in that game. He was putting them in a position to win.
Yeah.
So he's new-ish. JT Daniels is new-ish. Both of them have some experience, but we still don't know what either is really going to be able to do in this situation in a game like this. They are question marks. They're net positives, but we still have no idea, what we're going to be seeing on Saturday night.
Yeah, you think, okay, if it's a 4-quarter game, which we expect, that what happens in the 4th quarter with 5 minutes to go, the last drive for both of these younger quarterbacks who have never been in the spotlight before, that's how legends are made. But the thing is JT Daniels doesn't have to have these gaudy statistics. That's not the way Georgia is still built. They're so talented. You just talked about the talent on this team, that they still are going to have a solid defense. They are still the running game is still and should be the number one priority on offense. So you have a good season. You don't make mistakes. Then I think you've done everything that you're supposed to do, and that's why the critical moments in the big games against the top teams are going to be really what defines the season for Daniels and the Bulldogs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been that way in Kirby's entire tenure at Georgia as a head coach. It comes down to one play. One busted second 26 against Alabama, and you lose the national title. A fake punt with Justin Fields at a inopportune time. A drop pass, the first or second drive against Florida last year, when on a touchdown pass, you lose your quarterback and your top receiver. Both get injured on the same play. Hell, earlier this week, or excuse me, a couple weeks ago, we broke the news that Georgia was without Darnell Washington, one of their top tight ends, and Tyke Smith, a transfer from West Virginia, who's going to come in and play that nickel position, what Georgia calls a star. Both of them broke a bone in their foot. The same metatarsal, the 5th metatarsal, I don't know if it's the same on each same foot, but the same bone on the same day, same practice. That is like I say, it's just that one moment that has just defined Georgia football. Now, every team can say that, but seeing it firsthand, it's always been just like you're driving on Alabama, who winds up playing Notre Dame, blows them out for the national title. It's Georgia versus Alabama in this SEC championship game. And you come up 5 yards short because the ball's tipped at the line of scrimmage, and your wide receiver catches it thinking that's what he's supposed to do, and that's the end of the time. So it's very frustrating like that. So I can see why the Georgia fans are like, when does the ball bounce our way once? And I'm like, hey, there is a little bit of luck into it.
There is, and that's why what you really should do is kind of just stay the path. Don't because the worst decision you can make is to fire the coach and expect that it's definitely going to be better. It's got to be better, and it could be a lot worse. So,
and I want to touch back on what you're talking about them running the ball. You have Darnell Washington's out, 5-star tight end. Arik Gilbert's not with the team right now, 5-star tight end. George Pickens, your 5-star, all everything wide receiver. I mean, losing him was any other team. It's like losing a Devontae Smith or a Waddle. Of course, Alabama had 2 of them, so it didn't really matter. One of them was the Heisman Trophy, but Georgia doesn't have 2. But you do have 3 5-star running backs running against a bunch of 5-star offensive linemen, and you don't want to let Clemson have the ball a whole lot.
True.
Everybody who's waiting for the Todd Monken air raid offense might be very disappointed come Saturday when Kirby Smart's like, we need to win this game, and we're built to run it. So, Todd, let's run it.
Yeah, that'd be a nice way to go about doing things. Whether or not he can check his ego at the door, well, we'll see. Now, what is the status on Washington, long-term status?
It should be back, and I think I would say about 3 weeks. When we broke the news, we said he'd be out 4 to 6 weeks. It's an annoying place to have a injury, but they did the surgery the next day after he broke the bone. He's in a boot. Kirby says he's day to day. And I think
All
that's
right.
wildly optimistic. But hey, he's the head coach. He would know more. But we reported he'd be out at least the 4 weeks.
And then you mentioned Gilbert. So what's up with Gilbert?
Reed Gilbert, not with the team. He is.
Not
He
with
should
the
be back with the
team.
team. So he had some personal issues he needed to
Okay.
deal with. Kirby was asked about him yesterday. He said, "Look, we're praying for the guy. We expect him to be back. I think he's taking classes online. Should be back at some point, but he is not with the team right now."
And not many teams. I don't think any team in college football has 2 5-star tight ends.
Yeah.
Right.
And here's the thing: Brock Bowers, this true freshman out of California, may be just as good as both of them. I mean, now the thing with Darnell Washington, he's a huge body. He's just a matchup nightmare because he can run, but 6'8", 260 pounds, runs really well.
Wow.
You've seen what Reed Gilbert did with LSU last year.
Yes.
But all I hear about from people and Kirby's got practices closed. He doesn't let the media in. We don't even need to watch 3 or 5 minutes of them warming up.
Wow.
It's been COVID protocols and no access whatsoever. But we have people that go to practice that give us tidbits, and everybody that comes out of practice says, "Oh, JT Daniels looked in command of the offense, and that defensive front, they look good." But do you know who this Brock Bowers kid is? We're like, "Yeah, he's a tight end." Like, wow, they are raving about this tight end out of California. So
we'll see on Saturday night.
A California quarterback throwing to a California tight end might be something there.
Oh man, imagine that. Okay, then, and what's up? Well, you mentioned the West Virginia transfer. How long is he out for?
Same thing. Tyke Smith out about 4 weeks, but he wasn't going to win. In my opinion, he wasn't going to win the that nickel spot. I think Latavius Brini, the senior, would take over that spot.
Oh, really? Okay. That just shows you again how deep the team is. All right, now let's get back to the offense because you were talking about that running game. Zamir White is the name on the unit. Is that going to change at all this year?
That is the $1 million question because last year they stuck with Zamir White. He was coming back from an ACL injury. This is a guy who, I know that our contacts in the Clemson staff had told us when they were going after Zamir White out of North Carolina, they saw him as a generational tailback. Okay. They went all in on him. So did Georgia. Everybody in the country did. Then he tore his ACL. Came to Georgia, rehabbed it, tore another ACL. So finally came back last year and had a decent season, led the team in rushing, 700 some plus yards. But a lot of people think that, okay, that's the most you can get out of him. I don't see it that way. I remember Nick Chubb when he came back, he suffers this gruesome knee injury. Knee bends backwards at Neyland Stadium on the field. People think he may never walk correctly again. He might always be on a cane. And now you see what he's doing with the Browns. I mean, he's Nick freaking Chubb. Zamir White had that same mindset, compared to him a lot. Nick Chubb's first year back, he was a good, serviceable back. But he wasn't Nick Chubb. Yeah. His second year, he was Nick Chubb. And I think that, Zamir White may be the Zamir White of old this year. But the problem is you got Kendall Milton behind him, again, out of California, who is all everything. People are raving about him. And every week I'm asked who is my breakout player of the week. I always say James Cook. So I think James Cook could be used like a Percy Harvin type guy. Throw to him out of the backfield. Against Alabama last year, they lined him up in the backfield. Then right before the snap, they moved him up to the line. He caught a pass, took it 80 yards to the house. I mean, you don't know where he's going to be. You can use him as a blocker. You can use him as a scat back. You can use him in the slot. You can use him as a between the tackles runner. James Cook is always my guy. And all of them may not be as good as Kenny Milton, the 4-star guy. So it is an embarrassment of riches back there. But again, there's the seniority. There's the guy who's fought. The leader of that group is Zamir White. So how long do you ride him, or do you give it to maybe the guy that has the hot hand?
Nice to have those problems.
It is a good problem to have. Absolutely.
Offensive line, 2 more linemen gone to the NFL, Cleveland and Hill. So what does that say about? Is this the question mark of the offense?
It is a question mark, and the biggest part is you have to replace the center. Everything goes through the center. Losing Trey Hill to the NFL, he left a year early, but he had graduated, so it's not a situation where he needed to stick around. He's got his degree in 3 years, so look, I'm ready to go, and that was his plan all along, and he busted his tail to do it. So, hats off to him. But you bring in a guy by the name of Warren Erickson, who's going to be your center. Then halfway through camp, we break the news that he's broken a bone in his hand. So he's been trying to snap with his offhand. He's ambidextrous, and It would be nice to get him back, but you do have the number one center in the nation in Cedric Van Pran from last year, who's taking over. You also have Jamari Sawyer, who's probably a first or second round draft pick, and Georgia has had him at left tackle last year. Then they moved him to guard. Then they moved him to center. They want to move him to the inside and use some of their other 5-star offensive tackles on the outside. Okay. And that gives you that, losing Ben Cleveland, your big right guard, and Trey Hill, your interior needs work. And if you can bring in Jamari Sawyer, your best offensive lineman, to the interior, and he's got a interior body build. He's not 6'6", 6'7" like some of their other offensive tackles. If you can put some of those other guys out there, then you have a stout offensive line. So it's basically musical chairs. You've got 3 different guys that are 5-star offensive tackles who can play either tackle spot. You can move Jamari inside, but they're not going to. This week against Brian Breezy and Miles Murphy and all those guys, those edge rushers that are just such a nightmare for any opposing offense, you got to have Jamari Sawyer out there, your best player, protecting JT Daniels' blind side. So we'll see Jamari Sawyer out there at left tackle. We'll see either the freshman Cedric Van Pran, the redshirt freshman Cedric Van Pran, or Warren Erickson with a busted hand, trying to get that center quarterback exchange done right. And but as against UAB next week, or for South Carolina in a couple weeks, I bet we see some guys move around.
Okay. Yeah, you definitely don't want any center exchange issues in a game.
Yeah, against this defense, jeez,
no.
Come on.
No easy giveaways. So Sawyer, is he? You've seen a lot of good ones come out of Georgia too on the offensive line. How does he rank? Is he a first-round guy, second-round guy?
First or second? I mean, he went to the same school as Andrew Thomas, who's a first-round pick, and then last year or 2 years ago when they had Andrew Thomas and Isaiah Wilson go in the first round, that was pretty impressive. Sawyer is that same caliber. He's lights out. But how badly do you need a guard? Are you going after an offensive guard in the first round? That's sometimes they do. He's a good one, but if you think you can get him in the second round, maybe you go there. But he's a career guy. He's a 7 to 9 year NFL guy. There's no question in my mind.
Especially when you can play a number of almost every position on the field.
Yep,
on the offensive line. That's very valuable at the next level nowadays. Okay, so wide receiver with Pickens out, we know that Jackson kind of steps into that role as number 1. Blaylock, he's coming off the ACLs. So does the team rely on Blaylock? Is he going to be okay?
No, Blaylock won't be playing.
He won't.
He's not ready for it yet.
Out for the entire year.
Not for the entire year. It's
okay.
just you've had the same ACL injury to the same knee twice. It's so you bring him back slowly. You don't throw him out there against Clemson, and I don't know that he's been cleared for contact. He's been doing 7-on-7, but I don't think he's actually taken a hit in practice yet. And a lot of that's just mental. You've got to kind of come back and trust that knee. He is a precision route runner. I interviewed him after he finished 8th grade, was going into 9th grade, was playing for his high school 7-on-7 team, had yet to step foot on campus. He had not gotten books yet as a 9th grader, but he already had offers all over the country. That's what Dominic Blaylock brings you, but he's not going to be there. But you do have Jermaine Burton, who came on huge last year. You have Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, who was the one that was injured against Florida after just marching down the field, catching pass after pass. You got Kyrus Jackson, the leader in that slot position, who, when everybody was focusing on George Pickens, that left Kyrus Jackson to run all over the field and catch passes, all those underneath passes, and he'd have 7, 8, 9 catches in a game. He's back and he's healthy. And then you got Arian Smith, the guy who's a track star. He runs a 10.13 100-meter dash. Was made it to the SEC championship in the 100 meters. So this is a guy who can absolutely fly. More of a track guy than a football guy, but you do have options. But again, none of those are that big dog George Pickens, Jalen Waddell, Justin Ross, Devontae Smith type wide receiver. You got guys that are good, maybe great, but nobody who has hit the road as elite.
And again, it also hurts when your 2 elite tight ends are not available for the first few games or so. Okay, on the defensive side of the ball, the team lost 5 really key contributors to last year's team. You know, Ojulari was probably the biggest name. Of course, Stokes was the first-round draft pick for the Packers. So 3 guys in the secondary especially. But there's also a lot of guys coming back as far as the secondary and some transfers coming in as well. You mentioned, of course, one of them that won't be playing, but you got the Clemson kid coming over. Ringo's coming back from injury. So secondary is going to be different a little bit personnel-wise, but still very talented.
Yeah, well, you lost Mark Webb, who is your star. You lost Tyson Campbell, who was one of the first few picks in the second round at corner, and Eric Stokes in the first corner. Richard LeCount, your safety, starting safety, all SEC guy, he's gone. Tariq Stevenson, who was your backup at star, he transferred to Miami. So you wound up losing, and then DJ Daniel, who was one of your other cornerbacks, he left a year early. So you wound up losing 5 guys to the NFL, 1 guy to transfer at the end there. So you're down 6 guys in the secondary. You have to replace them. Keely Ringo comes in. This was a guy who had shoulder surgery, the number 1 cornerback in the nation, but didn't play his freshman year because he was coming back off surgery. And then you get Darian Kendrick, who a lot of people predict is a first-round draft pick. He leaves Clemson, comes to Georgia, is immediately eligible. Now he's playing against his own team, his old team, to start off the season. So your cornerbacks are good. You have a big question at star, and who's going to line up opposite Justin Ross? Who's going to line up right there? That's going to be a tough spot. And then you have Lewis Seen, who was your starter safety all year. That's kind of the only really returning starter.
Yeah.
And then Chris Smith, who had to come in after Richard LeCount was hit by a couple cars last year. So again, Georgia luck. They've had 3 players in the last year hit by a car. So it's just crazy stuff with Georgia. But yeah, you're rebuilding that secondary, but you're across the front. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Trayvon Walker, Adam Anderson will try to replace Azeez Ojulari as your premier rush guy. Georgia's front 7 are lights out. Clemson's front 7 are lights out. So that's going to be a very interesting. A lot of people are talking about the over-under on this. I'm taking the under all day.
Okay. That's interesting. What is the over and under? I don't even know what it is.
I think it was like 51.5.
Okay. That's pretty up. Well, yeah. I mean, usually, I think it's because it just appears that every time you get these big matchups, especially in the last several years, it's all offense.
Yeah,
everybody's
absolutely.
Scoring.
And you got 2 secondaries. I mean, here's the thing. Clemson has a very, very it's secondary. Look what they did in the playoffs. They get 6 touchdown passes, and those are the guys that are coming back. And they lost Darian Kendrick, their best guy. But as Kirby Smart pointed out yesterday, they are very, very experienced. They have a lot of starts amongst them. Georgia's going to have to rebuild its secondary, so you just think there's going to be passing all over the place, high scoring. But I'm thinking this is a situation where Kirby decides to hold on the ball, do a little more ball control than he would against other teams.
Okay.
Both teams, it's their first time in a full stadium.
Yeah.
It's the first game of the season. This isn't playoff football. This is first game of the year football. Yeah. And that's why I think and even to me, 51 is kind of low. That's why everybody's jumping on the over. And I'm like, Vegas isn't stupid.
No.
So
there's a reason for everything they do. Now, what about a couple of guys that maybe fans don't know, not household names, even though Nakobe Dean led the team in tackles. And then Nolan Smith, who's another 5-star player. Talk about those 2 linebackers. Which one do you think has maybe more star potential?
Star potential is Nolan Smith. I mean, just that size and speed. He's a 4'6" guy coming off the edge. People are like, well, why hasn't he blown up yet? Why isn't he that premier guy? I'm like, because there was a guy named Azeez Ojulari who's kind of good. And Adam Anderson, who was a year ahead of him. Right. So Nolan's, I mean, it's a situation where Georgia doesn't have 2 rush guys on the field at the same time. Their fronts, they run. There's usually only 1 real pass rusher on there, Okay. So, and that was Azeez Ojulari. So this is the year for Adam Anderson to do his thing and to bring Nolan Smith up there. But the guy who's going to do all the production is Nakobe Dean, because he's a true 3-down inside linebacker who can cover. He's small. He's Roquan Smith, a little bit smaller. That same sideline to sideline speed, that same ability to see what's going on, call out the defense, get them into the right coverages, and make adjustments when the offense changes what they're doing. But that's to make it and to have that star power, you have to be able to do something no one else can do, and to have that size speed combination that you have in Nolan Smith. that is what gets you to the next level, because everybody at that level is great. A lot of them could be 3-down guys. A lot of them can cover, but you have to have elite speed like Roquan Smith does, or you have to have strength, like a J.J. Watt, something like that. Adam Anderson has length and speed. I mean, he is a long-arm guy who can fly, so expect him to make some disruptions off the edge too.
And Davis, you mentioned him, so he's going to be your he's like your next level NFL knows.
Yeah.
What how talented is he? What kind of, because it's always hard to kind of grade those guys.
Well, I always go back.
They're not as, you don't see him as much in the NFL.
No, you don't. It's tough. But when you want to run that odd front, and you have to have a zero, technique, a one technique who can grab that center and be a true two-gap player. Take away both A gaps, read, react. That's what he does. And I keep mentioning that Georgia-Florida game because it shows the failings that Georgia had. And I mentioned him being out in that game was as big as them not having George Pickens or a quarterback who could hit a wide open receiver.
Okay.
The previous 2 years, George Pickens had gone up against Florida's starting center and had absolutely owned that kid. And I felt bad for him because Jordan Davis would just grab him and drive him into the backfield, play after play after play. And if the kid could just hang on to him, they'd get a holding call. He absolutely killed the center of that line. And once he was out, it changed the entire complexion of that game. And then Georgia they kept running this wheel route, and Georgia couldn't stop it. But again, there was no pressure up the middle because Jordan Davis wasn't in there. He is an absolute game changer. Georgia's offense looks different when he's on the field because he changes the field position so much. He's you don't see it as much until he's gone.
That's right.
And you're like, what the hell is going on? Why can't what's going on with Georgia's defense? Oh yeah, number 99 is not in the game.
Those guys are hard to find, especially the elite levels. And once you get them,
yes, absolutely.
Like you said, it makes a big difference when they're not there. Last question is, what happens if anything were to happen to JT Daniels? Who's coming in? Who's the number 2?
I think that was our first question to Kirby Smart. It was going to be to Todd Monken when we got to speak to him. We're like, hey, who's the backup quarterback? Because again, that's the most popular guy in all of college football. Every school, that's their number one guy. He said that he didn't come out and say who the number 2 guy was per se. He said Carson Beck, the kid out of Jacksonville, Florida, finished spring as our number 2. It's an ongoing competition right now. I think it's Carson Beck or Stetson Bennett. I know that Carson Beck has the higher potential, but as much as people like to give Stetson Bennett hell for the fact that he's 5'10" and had some passes knocked down the line of scrimmage against Alabama, this is a guy that was leading Alabama at the half. The only time Alabama's been behind at the half all last year was when Georgia had a healthy Stetson Bennett leading the offense. Now they made some adjustments at half that took away some of his throwing lanes, which everyone assumed was because he's only 5'10". A lot of it has to do with the fact that I don't care if you're 6'3", if someone's in your throwing lane and they jump at the same time you throw the ball away, you can't get it there. But if push were to come to shove, and you remember we thought that Jacob Eason a few years ago, Georgia's 5-star kid out of Washington, we thought this is Georgia's starting quarterback. 8 plays into the season, he got hurt.
Right.
And he had to take Jake Fromm, who I don't even know if he'd even put his helmet on, coming into the stadium.
Right.
He was thrown out there and had to take you. It was 2017. He had to take you to the national title game as a true freshman. But that stuff does happen. We see it happen all the time. And I think if push came to shove, they'd be like, well, we know what Carson can do from a physical standpoint, but we beat a ranked Auburn team with Stetson Bennett. We beat a ranked Tennessee team with Stetson Bennett. We were leading on Alabama with Stetson Bennett. So to me, I think if something happens, that's the guy you send out there.
One more thing, and that's the rivalry. They haven't played enough lately. Matter of fact, they're not going to play again until 2024. So this is not really anything that's going to come back, is it? On a steady basis.
Well, no, especially once you add Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC and you go to a 9-game schedule and you're in pods. No, it's kind of pointless to schedule them again.
All right, well, we'll see how the game goes. It's we all hope it's a.
But you might play them in the playoffs.
That's true. This could be, and it could happen this year too. We could see this. We could see a rematch. Yeah. I think Georgia has a better chance if they lose than Clemson because Clemson's in that ACC, and so Clemson may not be able to afford to lose this game, but they have such a reputation that maybe it doesn't matter. for the team.
Exactly.
Radi, appreciate it. And anybody out there that wants to follow Georgia football, it's ugasports.com, ugasports.com. Do you have any shows, any of your own podcasts that either you or Anthony or anyone else high up for the website does?
Yeah, if you want to check out UGA Sports Live, that's the best show. We had Kirk Herbstreit on our show yesterday for half an hour.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, not trying to name drop,
That's
but
great.
it's we when we do UGA Sports Live, I recorded it before we came on. We have Coach Donnan, the former Georgia head coach. He does a show with us, and then sometimes during the week, he's like, "Hey, let's get Paul Feinbaum on for half an hour to talk Georgia football. Let's get Bruce Feldman on here to talk for half an hour."
Okay.
So it's I recommend that because it's not always just Georgia football. If you want Kirk Herbstreit to talk about Georgia, the SEC versus the Alliance, NIL and all that stuff. He talked about that stuff for half an hour yesterday. And the Georgia Clemson game, one of his sons goes to Clemson as a player down there. So he had a lot of insights in that game. And, to get Paul Feinbaum on there to talk about stuff is hilarious. Jeff Foxworthy came on one time, was cracking jokes. So check out UGA Sports Live. It's a good podcast.
Awesome. Radi, I appreciate it. I look forward to get the opportunity to talk to you again, hopefully sometime this season, or I'll talk to Anthony. Either way, definitely look forward to talking to either one of you guys before the season's over.
We'll be happy to do so.